All right, let's go ahead and begin. Welcome everybody. My name is Devin Holbrook. I am coming at you live from Austin, Texas, and there's a huge thunderstorm going on right now. So I'm praying that I do not lose power during this presentation. If all of a sudden I disappear, you know why. And hopefully I can get back up and running with a hotspot or something. So just wanted to preface the presentation with that. So today we're going to be going over deliverability and best practices to maximize your inbox delivery. We've been getting a lot of questions on this lately, so we thought we would do a presentation on this to make sure that you guys are all well aware. If you have any questions during this time, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll try to get back to those. I'll probably wait until the end to get to those just because we're going through a lot of slides today, and I want to make sure that I get to go through them and maybe answer your questions that you have with some of those slides. All right. So like I said, today we're going through, oops, forgive me. Okay. Today we're going to be going through how to maximize your inbox delivery. First, we're going to be talking about what deliverability is, and then we're going to highlight key factors that are actually impacting your deliverability. And then lastly, we're going to talk about best practices for inbox delivery and steps that you can take in ActivePipe to make that better. So what is email deliverability? Email deliverability, and this is a good thing to go over, is the difference actually between email delivery and email deliverability. So there is a difference between the two. Email delivery is when an email can make it into any folder. So it's simply a yes or no question to, can this contact actually accept a message? If yes, the email goes forward into whatever folder it may. If no, that means that there's something else going on here. So some examples of that could be, or things that aren't getting delivered are, there's an invalid email address, or maybe the message was too large, or maybe that contact's inbox was too full, or perhaps the email domain is invalid. However, the idea to focus on here is, did the message end up in the contact's receiving end? If yes, then it was delivered. Okay, moving on. So then that's going to bring us into deliverability, which is, does the message actually land in their inbox? So here's where we're going to be looking at inbox placement, where the email actually lands once it gets to your recipient. So more specifically, we're going to be asking, what folder is this email ending up in? Is it the inbox? Is it spam? Gmail has a couple of different folders it sorts out to, like promotions. So this is where the question of deliverability comes in, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay. So the first thing that I want to go over is the definition or term that's really important for us to talk about, which is sending reputation. Your sending reputation, to me, the best way to think about this is kind of like a credit score. So it's basically a score from 0 to 100, and it's assigned by internet service providers. You'll see there's a couple of examples over here, and these help rate your reputation score. The higher your sending reputation score is, the higher the likelihood that you're going to end up in an inbox and not in spam. And then the lower your reputation score is, the more likely that you're going to end up in a spam inbox. So again, this is a really critical component of email deliverability, is your reputation score or your sending reputation. And that is a score from 0 to 100, very similar to kind of a credit score, but it's specifically to emailing. So now we're going to talk about what impacts deliverability. Okay. So the first is that we're talking about is your domain sending reputation. So your sending domain is everything that's after this @ sign right here. That is your sending address. So for many of you, this will be your website address. And for some of you, it might be a subdomain as well, which could look like activepipe.yourwebsite.com, that kind of thing. So that is what a subdomain is. Either way, the important thing to remember here is that whoever shares the domain with you, which in many cases will be pretty much all the other agents in your office, they also share responsibility in your sending reputation. So it's important to work as a team to keep your domain sending reputation healthy. And a positive reputation will mean that a higher chance of your emails landing in an inbox and not in spam. So we're going to next talk about some tips for improving your sending reputation, and that will come in a bit. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions here. Okay, it looks like we're good. Give me a second. Okay, so the second major part of this is based on how your recipients are actually engaging with your email. So if a contact deletes your messages without opening, smart filters in ActivePipe are going to notice that, especially Google Gmail, and that's when things start going into those other folders. So for example, if you sent an email to a contact that has a Gmail account and they delete it before opening it, Gmail's going to notice that and start maybe segmenting that into other folders that is not your direct inbox. Another consideration is that if contacts start flagging your emails as spam, that's definitely going to increase your likelihood of other emails going into spam. And then lastly, some contacts will hit the ever famous unsubscribe button. So when that happens, I want you to consider two things. Firstly, we don't actually think that's a bad thing. We take it in stride and we look at that as they're helping you clean out your database to really narrow it down. So that way you're actually sending emails to contacts that want to receive them. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does happen. Secondly, it's definitely worth asking yourself, am I sending the right message to the right group of people? If you're constantly sending all of your emails to your contacts, you're probably not sending the most relevant material. So you'll want to be sure that you're segmenting your contacts, and we're going to go over this in a bit, so that way you can provide the most pertinent message to the people who need it. Overall, if a contact unsubscribes, this is way better than if they mark you as spam. So I always say, approach the unsubscribe with some gratitude. All right, moving on. It doesn't look like we have any questions yet. Okay, so for our last, what impacts deliverability, we have the one that you are in the absolute most control over. And this is the content that's included in your email. It's really important when it comes to the subject line to avoid spam words. So in your email as a whole and in your subject line, these are some definitely quick tips for you guys to use so that you are not being sent to spam or flagged for spam. So there's certain words that totally get flagged for spam, and that is something like free, urgent, opportunity, deal, price, alert, quote. Those are all triggers for email providers that signal an email might be spam. This is really important for you to keep in mind for your subject lines. These are just a few examples, but if you do a quick little Google search, you'll definitely find some others. And to be clear, this is the subject line. This is the biggest red flag. So if these appear in the subject line, it's really likely to go to spam. Then when it's included in the body of the email. Okay, so try to keep some text included in your emails. That's another great tip. Emails that are 100% images are far more likely to be tagged as spam automatically. This is why we always encourage you to type out a personalized message at the top of your newsletter, at the top of your listing emails. Auto emails are not doing this. So places like, excuse me, I need a water break. I'm about to cough. Whew, there we go. Other auto emails like Zillow that are just automating emails out, they are not including personal messages. So this is a great opportunity for you to personalize emails and prevent you from going to spam. A couple other things to consider are being sure that when you're building out newsletters, that you're linking to reputable sites. So I always say your local newspapers and magazines are a great place to start. And 95% of the time, those are totally safe and reputable. What you do want to avoid is finding and linking an article from a random site that you haven't really ensured that the rest of the site is legit. So just be really conscious of where your links are going to. This is probably just a general good rule of thumb beyond deliverability, but for building out your brand as well. Another one is don't use excessive capitalization or punctuation might be one of the more simple and common mistakes that I've seen. So using a lot of exclamation marks, you only need one. I personally struggle with this. I'm a big fan of exclamation marks. I like to add a lot, but you really only need one. When you have multiple, it sometimes does get flagged. So especially in subject lines, I would avoid using excessive exclamation marks, and then using capital words as well. Words in all caps are pretty likely to be flagged as potential spam, so definitely avoid that. And then if you put that in your subject line, that's just a big no-no. Lastly, we take care of you on this one, but in all of your templates, you have a physical mailing address and an unsubscribe link at the bottom. That's a compliance rule to not be in the spam as well. So we have that in your account for you, but that's something to note in other emails that you might be sending. You definitely need those things to be compliant. All right, moving on. Do we have any questions? Okey-doke. I see one. I'm so sorry, I cannot see your question. So let me do a pause. All right, I'm gonna have to get to the questions at the end. I'm sorry for that. Just because I have this in full screen, it's not letting me view, I guess. All right, moving on. So best practices for inbox delivery. There are some aspects that impact deliverability, and we're going to talk more about the best practices that you can enact as soon as possible to maximize your inbox deliverability. The first thing is segmenting your list. This is very important. If you've come to any of our webinars before, you've definitely heard us say it. We want you to send the right message to the right people at the right time. And that hinges on having your contacts segmented into relevant groups. So being able to choose to send to groups like potential buyers versus potential sellers versus current buyers, and etc., will ensure that you're sending relevant information. As much as we can, we want to avoid using send to all contacts. That's a big no-no. And really the only use case for sending to all contacts is possibly a newsletter. But other than that, you want to target specific audiences. And that means if you're using a CRM and it's integrated with ActivePipe, then you'll need to use the organizing features in that CRM and they'll sync over to ActivePipe. Interesting. I'm seeing a lot of chat, so I am just going to pause for a moment. Should I use my own domain's email address rather than my brokerage? Mary Ellen, that's totally up to you. If you think that your brokerage might have a bad sending reputation and you don't want to be a part of that, then that's fine. A lot of brokerages recommend that you do it because we tend to see that they are more reputable, but it's really up to you. I would recommend having the conversation with other people at your brokerage before making that decision. That is a great question, Thomas. Is there a way for us to check out a company's reputation rating? And Enrique, I see that you asked that as well. Great question. I actually, oh, Ellen. Okay, glad to hear that your brokerage is brilliant. Please go ahead and continue using their domain. And if you feel like you're causing issues, then take some of the advice that I'm about to go over in the rest of the presentation, because there's some really great tips and tricks to make sure that your sending reputation is staying on point. Thomas and Enrique, fantastic question. I'm going to do a quick little Google search and see if there is a way to check. So it looks like you can actually ask your mailbox provider. So if you're using Gmail, you might be able to reach out to them. It says that they don't always do it, but it sounds like it's definitely worth asking your email provider, and they'll definitely be able to tell you. So definitely reach out to your email provider. Let me know how that goes on our next call. Okie doke. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Just one. Okay, let me go back to presentation. All right, so back to segmenting your list. This is really important for making sure that you do have a good sending reputation. So what I was saying is, if you have a CRM connected to ActivePipe, the way that you segment and tag your contacts is going to be happening in that CRM. Whereas if you're using ActivePipe to upload a CSV file, you can use our tagging system and split those contacts into different groups. I want to remind you all, if you're using a CRM or if you're manually uploading contacts on ActivePipe, it does not need to be overly complicated. If you had your list split into just like 5 target groups, then you're on point, and you'll be able to target your messages appropriately. So honestly, the key ones are potential buyers, potential sellers, and that would just mean that you would send potential buyers your listings, your recent listings, and then for potential sellers, you'd want to send them something like a sold report, market insights for the area, perhaps houses that you've recently sold, and marketing yourself to them. No need to do that to people that are currently trying to buy, that kind of thing. So those are a couple of examples. I want to dive into I'm not going to dive into how to tag today. We do a lot of webinars on that. And we have a lot of resources in our knowledge base on tagging. So feel free to check those out. But I do want to remind you that unsubscribes are actually also a form of tagging. They are helping you clean up your list. So do not be afraid of unsubscribes. Okie doke. Ooh. Okay, personalize your message. So another tip is personalizing your message. We touched on this a little bit. Make use of our placeholders. They're awesome. They'll help you tailor your message specifically to your contact. So not only does this help make the message look more personal and less spammy to the service providing systems that are screening your emails, but it's also a really great way to catch your contact's attention. If they see their name, they're definitely more inclined to read on. At least I am. So definitely use our placeholders. I think it's really important, a really great way to personalize your message, have that personal touch. And again, we are actually seeing that this helps prevent you from going into spam. So take advantage. This one also loops back around to segmentation because personalizing the content is really important. So the more that you can spend on your Fort Worth clients information about Fort Worth and Dallas clients about Dallas, the better. If you catch my drift, those are 2 different areas. So we want to make sure that we are playing into the locations of our clients and being more personal in that regard as well. And the first thing that you'll want to do is have your tag group set up, but then you can also create local content for separate needs. And that's an even stronger way to personalize your message. Okay, moving on. So tracking your engagement, this is another great way to kind of keep in touch. We've shown this in many webinars before. The amount of data you get back from your email is huge. So really great idea to keep an eye on this and check in on your campaign reports, see what's getting solid open and click rates, and which emails are low, and then use that to your advantage. So keep up with your top performers, maybe consider tweaking your low performers to try and give them a boost. The more opens and clicks you get, the more likely that your emails end up in inboxes versus on the flip side. If your open and click rates are always super low, then that's where you start ending up in spam. So for perspective, across all of the US, our ActivePipe clients right now, the average open rate is about 18%. And the average click rate is about 11%. So if your open rate is below 10%, that's when things start to get a little dicey. Keep that as your minimum benchmark. And we're going to talk about some things on how to get that up. So quick tips to prevent deliverability issues. The last few pieces of advice that I'll give you are, first of all, do not purchase lists. This is a really big no-no. We've seen it happen several times. Buying lists is getting more and more dangerous for your sending reputation. We've seen some lists that actually have spam traps in them. Now, for example, an email address like spam@spamcompliance.com and things that like included these lists are included in these lists. So just don't do it. Remember that deliverability is a collective experience, meaning if you buy a list and suddenly your sending reputation tanks, now the contact who actually did want to receive your emails are not going to, because they are more likely to end up in spam. So again, big no-no to buying lists. You guys are great at what you do. You have lots of contacts. You work with lots of people. Use them. They want to stay in touch with you. You don't need to buy a list. Another similar tactic is trying to harvest lists from social sites. So a good idea to avoid this as well. We want to be sure that the contacts in your list are there, because at some point they said, yep, sign me up. And they purchased or harvested lists simply do not fall into that category. And we do have a great resource on our side, the sign up pages that you guys can find in your settings. Those people are actually signing up to receive your emails. Email them. Use that to your advantage. And the last thing that you can do is check on your own sending reputation. My apologies, I did know how to do this. There are websites and services like SenderScore that will tell you what the reputation of your domain looks like. So SenderScore, it sounds like that's a great resource. It sounds like most of those are free as well. So do some research and see what you are up against. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is a feature that we can enable for you at ActivePipe, and that is Smart Send. So Smart Send, it uses your engagement data to temporarily suspend any emails to contacts that haven't been opening your emails. So any contact who doesn't open at least 3 of your past emails, we can mark them as disengaged and they don't receive emails for 60 days. And then after that period, they'll receive their next scheduled email. If they open it, they're moved from the disengaged list, so they're removed from that. And then if they don't open it, we'll keep them disengaged for another 60 days. So this is a really great feature, in my opinion. It cleans up your data. It sends emails to people that actually want to open your emails, and therefore your open rates will skyrocket. So this is actually a really great feature. I think definitely worth taking advantage of. And unfortunately, if you have not been great on ActivePipe sending and you have a bad reputation, we actually have to turn this on for you. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any other questions. That was the end of our presentation, but hopefully that helps clarify a lot for everyone here on email deliverability and some best practices that you guys can do to make sure that you keep up that sending reputation. All right, I'm going to check the Q&A. Is that the same as a bounce email? So no, bounce emails are actually typically caused by something like an inaccurate email. So for example, you have a misspelling, like Gmail is missing the G in Gmail, and so maybe you need to go in and correct that email. Bounce emails also show up for like people that have away out of office messages, and that can actually cause a bounce email as well. And then another case that I see sometimes is like a new employee to the office receives an email before they've actually set up their account. And in that case, that email would be bounced as well. But if you send another email in a couple of weeks to them and that email is open, then you are good to go. So hopefully that answers that question. Of course. I am so relieved. I know I kind of blew through that. I really was so paranoid that we're going to lose power here. So thank you, everybody. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'm also going to share our ActivePipe webinar page. This has all of our recordings and future signups for other webinars. It's on activepipe.com under resources. I'm going to share that right here in the chat. Please bookmark it, you all, since you guys come to these. We want to hear we want to see you continuing to show up. And if you ever need to share these resources with anyone, they are there. So that is in the chat. Go ahead and bookmark that. Make sure you select North America because we want you guys watching our webinars and not the Australian ones. All right, I see another question. Are brokers open to getting emails from other brokers? Phoenix, I see that happen all the time. I have a lot of customers that have broker lists that they send their listings to. So yeah, as far as I know, brokers are definitely open to getting emails from other brokers. And if they're not, then they'll unsubscribe. And like I said, that's really not a bad thing. So, okay, last thing I'm going to do here is send out a quick poll. Just make sure that y'all enjoyed this session today. I saw a couple of you said it was quite informative. Thank you very much on that. Awesome. Well, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Thanks so much for joining. We have some awesome webinars coming up next week. We're actually doing a webinar specifically on other admins' newsletters. So definitely come and check that out, seeing what other people's newsletters. That'll be really helpful. So come join us next week. All right. I saw someone, Scott Kelsey, how do you do that poll? The poll is, this is the Zoom webinar feature. So I'm not sure if you can do it in regular Zoom. You might be able to, but I know that we are able to set it up in the Zoom webinar feature. And then what we actually do is set them up on the back end before joining the call. So these are all in the polling, like you have to create them before you start the webinar. So hopefully that's helpful, Scott. Honestly, we figured it out through a quick Google search. So hopefully that helps. Zoom has some really good resources. So, all righty, everybody. Thanks so much for your time.